We're here today on Country Pocket with Joe Fuller. The new album is Wood of the Grain, and the song you just heard is called Tango. Um, that one hit hard for me. I know what it's like to have someone in your life with that strong will and the ability to make sure you're falling in line with it. And I know what it feels like to sort of have the rose in my mouth and at the same time want to upend that dynamic. So tell me about this little dance you were doing.
Mm. Yeah, this little dance was with a really important person in my life, which I think was actually just a similar relationship to what I had with my parents growing up, but it wasn't actually my parents. And this person just made me feel broken, made me feel lesser than. Um, and it was, sort of complex and that they tried to kind of disguise that view of me, or maybe they didn't want to have that view of me, but they did. And I could just feel it. I could sense it. Um, and it was a really difficult dance to be in because it pinged probably the thing that I was most afraid of, afraid was true about myself, that was broken. And something that they believed to be true. And I was participating. I had the rose in my mouth. Um, And I wanted them to own their part. That's largely what the song, you know, is about. Um, yeah, let's tango.
Um, did you get them to own their part?
No, no, no.
No.
And you rarely do. You rarely do. Like, I think in the end, I had to own my own part and see you know, how I was participating in them having such a big impact on my world, my emotional world. Um, and at this point in time, a few years down the road from that relationship, um, that's enough for me. That sort of closure of like realizing my role in creating that dynamic, because it takes two to tango. Um, that was sort of all the closure that I ended up needing.
Yeah, at some point, you have to realize that because of the nature of this scenario where someone else is controlling your internal monologue, where someone else is dictating everything, it's complicated because obviously they're not necessarily treating you right, but you do have the ability to get away. You do have the ability to control what's going on inside your head, but at the same time, you don't feel like you do until you do.
Hmm. Yeah, or even I don't always feel like I have the ability to control what's inside my head, but I think you have the ability to be aware of what's happening inside your head. And then you have the ability to control how you're participating in the dynamic. Like, how is it that that person has so much control over you? In my case, because we're all going to relate to this differently. In my case, again, this person's idea that there's something wrong with me or that I was broken had so much power because I I believed it too. And within the dynamic of that relationship, I sort of groveled. I tried to be a different person than I was in order to gain that person's approval. Um, And so I participated in a dynamic in a way that made the belief true. I needed to be someone different than myself. Um, So yeah, just back to that idea, I don't think we always have control of the thoughts. Like I might always, you know, or not always, but occasionally think, oh, what if I am fundamentally flawed? Or what if there is something that's fundamentally wrong with me? But the action that I take, from that thought, I think is what really matters.
Yeah, I mean, we all are going to have our flaws being human beings or whatnot, but this is an album of confrontation. And for the most part, you are not necessarily confronting others,
Mm.
but nonetheless, the work is hard. Um,
Hmm.
it might even be harder than confronting others. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, you're right. I'm not necessarily confronting others, and yet I am. I'm confronting the impact of others on my internal landscape. Um, so in a lot of the, you know, bio ideas that I've had for this album, I've written that it's about development in context because we all develop within our relative context and sort of, the different levels, micro, macro levels of that context. But then when we're, coming to terms with who we are and why we do what we do, we're dealing with that historical context, where we grew up, how we grew up, who was in our lives, who built these, internal narratives that we talked about. So it is very much this confrontation with self and then confrontation with those that contributed to the self. Um, and all of it's hard.
Yeah, you have a song, Paper Tiger, where um, you're fighting these things, a paper ceiling that you're
Mm,
trying to break through. These obstacles are of such a crushing weight, and yet you describe them as being made of paper.
hmm. A paper tiger is like a tiger, but it's not. It's something that's disguised as having strength or power, but it doesn't really. And honestly, when I wrote this song, I had no idea what it was about. This poetry just sort of came to me, and I really had to grapple with it and make it my own. And in its current form, or in my current relationship to it, I think that paper aspect is sort of about avoidance or even self-preservation. It's just like there's so much more power in genuinely occupying who we are or where we are, or essentially like, can we just get with what's happening right now? There's this, there's a feeling of power in distraction or in avoidance, but in reality it's weak and it falls apart pretty quickly. Um, so that's how I'm thinking about Paper Tiger right now.
Yeah, um, it does. It doesn't fall apart quickly, but then it does.
When it does, then it does.
Exactly. And you start to get at the fact that it's a shift in attitude toward those difficult things. You say, the dark doesn't bother you, the demons are going to become your pride.
Hmm.
They're going to follow your orders now. Um, so tell me about just shifting your attitude towards those heavy things.
Yeah, the lyrics there in the chorus are I stalk the streets at night, making pleasant conversation with those who won't show their face in the light. Um, and it continues, I'm not hunting for peace of mind. Give me all those little demons and I'll make them my pride. And yeah, I wrote that, I guess, sort of aspirationally. Like, can I stalk the streets of my mind? Can I begin to make conversation with the parts of myself that I'm scared of? Honestly, when it comes down to it, they freak me out. Um, and it's been a process. It's not something that like I've done overnight. But yeah, I think it's just really taking time to allow parts of myself to notice when I'm having a big reaction towards myself about something and just trying to be more understanding or more curious about it rather than like relegating it to the darkness where it can't show its face in the light. Like maybe some of these things don't have to be, you know, stalked on the streets at night. Like maybe eventually these are parts of myself or, recurring thoughts or feelings that I can come to know.
Yeah, uh I think it's interesting to think that perhaps instead of broken, you know, instead of being made to feel broken, what was going on was simply that you needed to like look under the hood and figure out what's going on. And you're not necessarily uh, something isn't broken if it just sort of needs a little maintenance.
Mm,
There's a
mm,
huge difference between broken and quite easily fixed. And especially for human beings, even when broken might apply, you almost have to try for the fix anyway. I mean, if that's you living that life, well, what other choice do you have?
yeah, I mean, this just opens such important ideas right now. As a culture, we readily pathologize anything that we don't understand or consider normal. And coming back to this idea of development and context, like the things that we consider broken or non-ideal about ourselves, like they're not just random flaws, like they are things that developed as a response to something in our context. Like they're actually worthy of our understanding or curiosity or just compassion towards because they're not just randomness. It's not brokenness, it's actually adaptation. And a lot of times, when understood, that adaptation can really serve you. So I just think, yeah, the idea of brokenness and how pervasive that feeling, I'm broken, I'm fundamentally flawed, how pervasive that feeling is in our culture is really just a product of how quickly we pathologize something instead of getting curious about it, honoring it. It doesn't mean we have to believe it. It doesn't mean it has to rule our lives, but it sure as hell is not brokenness.
Yeah, it's a lot of self-maintenance. We're going to take a listen to Paper Tiger and then we'll be back and maybe we'll do some of that examination or at least talk about the process.